Hi, my name is Thais Gibson, and I'm the creator of the Personal Development School. And this is your daily breakthrough video. In this video, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about different questions that many people have been asking about me. So I decided to just sort of make a video about it and share some of my history, my background. And what I will do is put a couple videos together. I literally get a lot of requests for stuff like this. So I'll put a couple videos together and just share a little bit more about myself, some really important lessons I learned along my journey and things that I think can really provide impact and value to you. So one of the first questions I have is, how long have you actually been doing this? So my journey was really interesting. It began at a very young age. As many of you know, I struggled with addiction from just before I turned 15, so really 14 years old until 20, 21 years old. And right around 20, I started healing and learning. And a big part of this healing and learning was I was in a psychology class. So I went to school for psychology, and I was high functioning, even though I was struggling with addiction big time. And I was actually thinking at this time about dropping out of school because I didn't know how I was going to keep it all together. And I actually had somebody say to me in my class, the conscious mind can't outwill or overpower the subconscious mind. And if anybody's ever struggled with addiction, you're kind of fighting a war within yourself a lot of the time. There's a lot of this, I'm not going to do this again. This is it. This is it. The last time. And then you keep going back and rehashing and going through the same patterns. And that was a really painful part for me personally, of what I experienced, because a lot of me was like, what am I doing? I don't want to keep going back here. I don't want to do this anymore. And so for me, to hear that was oh my goodness. And that sort of kickstarted this journey of this explains everything, and me really learning about the subconscious mind. So I sort of became honestly, probably transferred one addiction to the other. I almost became addicted to learning for a little while, and pouring into figuring out how my subconscious mind was working and why I was going through the same patterns, and really trying to understand everything I could about that. And so after really healing from addiction and really getting sober and living life and feeling good again, I was oh my gosh, all I want to do with my life right now is just share this information for free. Just share with people, look, this is why you're blocked. And that really applies to everything, why you can't get over these really painful patterns, why you can't stop self-sabotaging, why you never accomplish your New Year's resolutions, because your conscious mind wants one thing and your subconscious mind has a different set of intentions, and your subconscious mind will always win at the end of the day. So when you can learn to reprogram your subconscious mind, you get all this freedom back. So for me, then at 21 years old, 22 years old, maybe, probably 22, I guess, I started giving free workshops to people, and I just wanted to tell people. So I'd host these little meetup groups and let people come and just for free be hey, this is your subconscious mind. And I just wanted to tell everybody who would listen that you can heal, that these things can change. And so a lot of people would reach out to me afterwards and be hey, can you see clients? So I basically accidentally, just because I was so passionate about sharing, started my client practice when I was 22 years old, seeing people for free. And then 23 years old, after literally a year or so of seeing people for free, I was okay, people would be you have to charge. And I was giving so much of my time because I was actually working full-time at the same time. And then I was still doing school part-time the entire way for my graduate program that I was doing. So it was this, okay, I'm doing so much and I have to actually transition and leave the current job I'm in and actually start charging for my services so I can properly put time towards it without exhausting myself. So I kind of started my practice at 23 while I was still in school. And I would see a lot of people. I was very blessed where my practice filled up super, super quickly, in part too, because I was doing a lot of free workshops and just sharing wherever I could. So in a very short period of time, I kind of had a 2-year wait list building out, where it would be this ongoing wait list that just kept growing and growing and growing. And I'd see sometimes I actually had to work on boundaries a little bit at this time. I'd see sometimes 40 people in a week, just because people would be my subconscious mind, I'm learning all these things, I'm healing. And they'd be can you please see my brother who's in pain? Or can you please see my mother? And it would be really difficult for me to say no, because I really cared. And I had been through a lot of understanding pain and suffering, and just really cared to wanted to help. And I kept being oh, I've healed so much, I'm totally fine, I can do it. But I actually looking back now, wish I had better boundaries a little bit earlier, because I kind of like exhausted myself and stopped showing up for myself a little bit physically. And that was work that I still had to be doing in healing. And like healing is always going to be an ongoing process. But I almost like was like a little premature in some of the lessons I had to learn to really be able to run a thriving practice and properly consider myself equally at the same time. So I kind of learned those things more of the hard way, like while I was in it. And then sort of like learn to scale back and sort of figure things out. And then a lot of people ask me, like, do you like, was attachment theory the main focus for you? And the answer is no. Like when I started working with people, a lot of it was people's core wounds, people's unmet needs, people's subconscious imprints from trauma. I did a lot of trauma work with people. That was like a huge focus. And then learning about like how to structure healthy habits and reprogram your subconscious mind and heal these imprints left from trauma. And so what was so interesting for me is when I really dove into attachment theory, and I did a whole bunch of different like postgraduate certifications as well, like tons of stuff like CBT, NLP, hypnosis, like literally like over 13 different things. And I honestly keep just doing one or two a year because I just love learning about this stuff still. And there's so much to learn about the mind. And I really believe we're like always healing and growing. But basically what sort of happened is after a while, I learned about attachment theory. And then I started realizing, oh my goodness, like people's core wounds, their needs, their emotional patterns, all these things I was working on with people previously, they fit so perfectly into different attachment styles. Like there's these patterns that exist for each of these major attachment styles. So I actually started overlapping the work I was previously doing that really engaged the subconscious mind with attachment theory. And then people's core wounds, people's unmet needs, people's emotional patterns, people's expectations in relationships and their love languages. And that's part of, I think, why some of the work on this channel feels very specific to people, because there's very specific patterns that we're, that are very deeply wired into us, that though it's never going to be one size fits all for everything, and it's not so cookie cutter completely, there are a lot of really powerful similarities. And so it sort of allowed us to go deeper with attachment theory in general. And then I ended up from that point forward starting to work with a lot more couples in my practice, because attachment style work became I think there was a really big hunger for it. So essentially, that was sort of that original first transition. And now, I guess back in the beginning of 2019, I started realizing a lot of people were like getting frustrated with me, because it'd be like, oh, there's kind of like a 1.5 year wait list. It might be up to 2 years. And people would like call back or email back or people would, be like, hey, like you said you would see my family member, and like, what's going on? And things just kept growing and growing. And I was kind of like, oh my gosh, what do I do? And I didn't have a lot of business experience. And so I started trying to teach classes in person and put like a personal development school in person together, and was teaching classes in person to try to see those people who needed help earlier and provide value. And then I had a friend of mine come along, who's my business partner at the school now, and say, you should put it online instead. Like, stop doing the stuff in person, put it online. And this will help you to like reach people in a way that you don't have to keep being there and being present. And it will stop you hitting this glass ceiling from sharing the things that you want to share. So that's actually what created like the online personal development school. And when I started actually putting content on YouTube and realizing like the online world is going to be a better way of doing all this stuff. So a lot of people also ask me about my age. So I'm now turning 31. So in October, so just a couple months from now. And have basically been doing this work. I think the average, on average, you're taught, as a counselor, like see about 12 people, maybe up to 15 people a week. And I was sort of seeing like 30 to 40, sometimes a little more than that, even people a week. And that was so I've been doing this now for 8 or 9 years, going on 9 years, I guess. So just like time has flown by, which is pretty crazy. And then a lot of people will ask questions about my partner, like a lot. I get a lot of questions. So I figured I'll just put it all out here and share. And we met when I was 24, I believe. So we've been together. This will be going into this fall. I think we're going on our 7th year together. And he's actually a year younger than me. And he was DA when I met him. And I was like still in my very early stages when I met him. I had done a ton of work on myself, but hadn't done a ton of work like in a relationship yet. So I still had like minor FA patterns. I would say I was like very predominantly secure with like some FA tendencies still that I had to really resolve like in real time in a relationship, because I spent a period of my life when I was healing for about 3-4 years or so, being completely single, really focusing on myself, my healing, my work, like learning, growing, and you know, I wouldn't necessarily recommend the way I did things. It worked very well for me, but I was kind of like obsessively focused on myself and my healing and my growth, and then obsessively focused on my work. And so, you know, I kind of like pour myself a little too much into things sometimes. And part of my growth right now as a person is always trying to like maintain balance instead of getting so focused on things, because I become very passionate about things very easily. So one thing about him, so he was definitely predominantly DA when we met, and I was very focused on work. And we definitely had like a power struggle phase and all those things. But I learned from him, for anything that was left of my FA attachment style at this point, like one of the most important lessons I learned being with him is like, if this is going to work at all, I have to be super good with my boundaries and super good with my needs and totally express my needs consistently. And so we had a point in the relationship where I was sort of like, where is this going to go? I'm not really sure. But all I know is that these are things I have to do to show up on my end of the relationship. And if he wants to work with me, and show up as well in a healthy way, then part of that's going to come from him literally doing the work in the relationship dynamic and like meeting the needs and making compromises and being more vulnerable and opening up. And he like showed up extraordinarily well. Like I literally couldn't be more thankful for what a great like human being and partner. And so I have a lot of appreciation and I think a lot of understanding for DAs, because, and not all DAs are like this, just like not any other attachment style is always going to show up and do all the work when they have work to do. But he was like, showed up like 10 out of 10, like really tried, was really consistent, really put in the effort, like all the little things that would cause friction when we went through our power struggle phase for about a year. He like really got focused on, present on, did the work on, and like just now is at a point, because he did that work in the relationship too, he's super securely attached. And it's interesting because I kind of watch this evolution of him where he would be very private, not private, but like closed down a little bit with people. And even like as he started growing and becoming secure, like it was beautiful because like in him doing the work in the relationship, he was also benefiting himself in a lot of ways. And he's like so much more warm and comfortable and open. And I saw a lot of that really taking place too, which was nice. So what I can do, because I know a lot of people have a lot of questions, I'm trying to just touch on some light ones without making the longest video ever. But what I can do is, if you guys are curious, you want to see more about this, specifically, I wanted to answer those main questions that I get all the time. But I can make a separate video with like key lessons we learned along our journey, key things to pay attention to. We got engaged recently, which I meant to share earlier on, because you probably see a ring on my finger when I'm waving my hands around like I always do. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have. We got engaged going on our 7th year. And I wanted to really make sure, obviously, because we kind of grew up together too, right? Because, you know, we met when we were in our sort of earlier 20s and went through that sort of whole phase of like growing up and figuring things out together and going through life together and learning and growing and figuring out how things work and the direction of our lives. And 2 things I really wanted to make sure that we did is, number 1, make sure that we waited until we were really in the commitment phase of a relationship. As you go through the life cycle, that was like a promise I made to myself when I was learning about relationships, not because I think everybody has to do it that way, but because after a lot of the dynamics I had been through and some of the things that I was exposed to in my practice and in my past, just all sorts of different things, I thought that was just going to be the right thing for me personally. And so yeah. So, and I, you know, I'm really happy that was sort of how things unfolded. So anyways, let me know if you have any other questions. I know people are asking quite a few, so I'm really happy to share with you guys anything you want to see, hear, learn more about, know. And I can make a separate video about like key lessons I learned in like the FADA dynamic and how we work together to become really secure in the relationship. So let me know. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for being here. Please like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next video.